The scrolls of history unfurl a tale of a once unified kingdom, its strength and prosperity blossoming under the wise reign of King Solomon. Yet, the seeds of discord lay dormant, waiting for the winds of change to scatter them. The succession of his son Rehoboam marked a turning point, his heavy hand and unsympathetic ear to the northern tribes igniting a fire of discontent that would ultimately cleave the nation in two. This schism laid the foundation for the complex and often hostile relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans, a story rooted in political division and the diverging paths of religious practice. Solomon's rule was a golden age for the 12 tribes of Israel, a testament to the power of unity. His wisdom was renowned, his kingdom a beacon of stability. But the weight of leadership proved too heavy for Rehoboam. When the northern tribes, burdened by heavy taxation and feeling marginalized, sought relief, Rehoboam's arrogant refusal, fueled by the counsel of younger, less experienced advisors, sealed the fate of the unified kingdom. Their plea for a lighter yoke was met with a promise of greater oppression. "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father scourged you with whips, but I will scourge you with scorpions." These defiant words echoed the chasm that had already begun to form, and the response was swift and decisive. 10 of the 12 tribes, their patience exhausted, seceded to form the northern kingdom of Israel. They established their capital in Samaria, a strategic move signifying their break from the southern dominance. The remaining 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, remained loyal to the lineage of David, their kingdom centered in the sacred city of Jerusalem. This political separation was more than just a change on the map. It was a profound rupture in the shared identity of the Israelites, a wound that would fester and deepen due to diverging religious practices and interpretations. Jeroboam the first king of the northern kingdom, was acutely aware of the powerful religious pull of Jerusalem and its magnificent temple. He feared that the deeply ingrained tradition of worshipping at this central sanctuary would continually draw his people back to the authority of Judah, undermining his own sovereignty. Driven by this concern, Jeroboam made a decision that would irrevocably alter the religious landscape and further divide his people from their brethren in the south. He established alternative centers of worship within his kingdom, most notably at Bethel and Dan, sites already holding historical religious significance. To oversee these new sanctuaries, he appointed priests who were not from the Levitical line, the tribe traditionally designated for priestly service, according to the ancient laws. He also instituted his own religious festivals, distinct from those observed in Jerusalem. These actions were seen by the people of Judah as a grave transgression, a blatant act of idolatry, and a rejection of the divinely ordained practices centered at the temple. While the northern kingdom sought to solidify its political independence, its religious innovations only served to deepen the chasm between the two entities. The kingdom of Judah held fast to the belief that Jerusalem was the sole legitimate place for the worship of Yahweh, the only altar upon which acceptable sacrifices could be offered. In contrast, the northern kingdom of Israel, through its establishment of rival religious sites and its gradual absorption of pagan influences from neighboring cultures, embarked on a distinct spiritual journey, widening the cultural and religious rift between the Jews and the 10 tribes who now identified as Israelites of the northern kingdom. For over 2 centuries, the two kingdoms coexisted in a state of uneasy tension, their interactions marked by sporadic conflicts and shifting alliances. Prophets arose in both Israel and Judah, delivering impassioned messages of divine warning and urgent calls for repentance. Yet, within the northern kingdom, the spiritual trajectory continued its downward course. The allure of foreign deities and the adoption of practices explicitly forbidden by the law of Moses led to a gradual erosion of their exclusive devotion to Yahweh. The prophetic voices, though persistent, were largely ignored by the rulers and a significant portion of the population. The year 722 BC brought a cataclysmic end to the northern kingdom. The mighty Assyrian Empire, a formidable power steadily expanding its dominion across the ancient Near East, turned its relentless military might towards the northern kingdom of Israel. Under the leadership of King Shalmaneser V, the Assyrian legions invaded, laying a protracted and devastating siege upon Samaria, the proud capital of Israel. After enduring immense suffering and relentless assault, Samaria finally fell. The northern kingdom of Israel was no more. The Assyrian conquest was not merely a military victory, it was followed by a deliberate policy of population transfer and cultural assimilation, a strategy designed to break national identities and prevent future rebellions. In accordance with their imperial practices, the Assyrians exiled a significant portion of the Israelite population, scattering them across the vast expanse of their empire. This tragic event, forever remembered as the loss of the 10 tribes, had a profound and lasting impact on the history of the Jewish people. In the depopulated territories of Samaria, the Assyrians implemented a resettlement program, bringing in people from various conquered lands, including Babylon, Cutha, Avva, Hamath, and Sepharvaim. These new inhabitants brought with them their own distinct religious beliefs, cultural customs, and social traditions. As these foreign populations intermingled with the remnants of the Israelite population who had not been exiled, a new ethnic and religious identity began to take shape, giving rise to the Samaritans. Initially, these new settlers continued to worship their diverse pantheon of gods, adhering to the religious traditions of their homelands. However, a dramatic and fear-inducing series of events unfolded. The region of Samaria was plagued by attacks from lions, a phenomenon that instilled deep terror among the new inhabitants. Unfamiliar with the local spiritual forces believed to govern the land, they interpreted these attacks as a sign of divine displeasure, believing they had offended the local deity, whom they came to know as Yahweh. Desperate to appease this perceived territorial god, they appealed to the Assyrian king, requesting guidance on how to propitiate him. The Assyrian monarch, concerned with establishing stability and ensuring the productivity of his newly acquired province, responded by dispatching an exiled Israelite priest back to Samaria. This priest was tasked with instructing the foreign settlers in the basic tenets of Yahwistic worship, teaching them about the God of Israel and his commandments. However, the resulting religious practices were far from a pure and exclusive adoption of the ancient Israelite faith. Instead, a syncretistic form of worship emerged, a fusion of reverence for Yahweh, alongside the continued veneration of the various foreign deities that the settlers had brought with them. This blending of religious traditions became a fundamental and enduring point of conflict with the Jews in the south. Those who had painstakingly preserved their religious purity in Judah viewed the Samaritans' mixed faith as a heretical contamination, an unacceptable dilution of the pure monotheistic faith passed down through their lineage. The question of the legitimate site and manner of worship became a deeply entrenched chasm, dividing these two groups, descendants of a common ancestry who would increasingly view each other with suspicion, disdain, and outright hostility. The stage was set for centuries of animosity, a drama that would eventually encounter the transformative power of one man's message of love and unity. The emergence of the Samaritans in the aftermath of the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom marked not a bridge between fractured brethren, but rather the solidification of a deeper and more enduring chasm. The Jews of the southern kingdom, having navigated their own trials of exile and return, viewed the Samaritans with a mixture of suspicion, religious condemnation, and a sense of ethnic impurity. The very origins of the Samaritan people, a blend of exiled Israelites and the foreign populations resettled by the Assyrians, became a constant source of derision, a visible symbol of what the Judeans perceived as a compromised heritage. This initial disapproval, rooted in the circumstances of their formation, evolved into a complex web of theological and cultural distinctions that further entrenched the divide. While both Jews and Samaritans held the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, in high regard, their acceptance of subsequent scriptural texts diverged significantly. The Jews embraced the entirety of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, including the prophets and the writings, as divinely inspired and authoritative. The Samaritans, however, recognized only the Torah as canonical scripture, rejecting the prophetic books and the later historical and wisdom literature revered by the Jews. This fundamental difference in their scriptural canon contributed significantly to the theological gulf separating them, with each side viewing the other's understanding of God's word as incomplete or misguided. Furthermore, the issue of the legitimate sanctuary for worship became a central and fiercely contested point of contention. For the Jews, the temple in Jerusalem held an exclusive and divinely ordained status. It was the site chosen by God, the dwelling place of His Shekinah glory, and the sole authorized location for offering sacrifices and observing sacred rituals. The Samaritans, however, developed their own sacred center on Mount Gerizim, near the ancient city of Shechem. Based on their interpretation of certain passages in the Torah, particularly Deuteronomy, they believed that Mount Gerizim was the true holy mountain, the place where God had commanded Abraham to offer Isaac, and thus the rightful location for their central temple. The construction of a Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim was not merely a matter of differing interpretations. It was perceived by the Jews as a direct challenge to the divine authority and unique sanctity of Jerusalem. It represented the Samaritans' assertion of their own religious legitimacy, a defiant act that further inflamed the already strained relations. Each community held an unwavering conviction in the correctness of their own chosen site for worship, and this deeply rooted disagreement fueled centuries of animosity and separation. Over the ensuing centuries, interactions between Jews and Samaritans became increasingly rare and fraught with tension. Mutual suspicion hardened into ingrained prejudice. Jewish travelers, journeying between the regions of Galilee in the north and Judea in the south, would often undertake arduous detours, crossing the Jordan River to avoid traversing the territory of Samaria. They viewed the Samaritans as ritually impure, their land tainted by the presence of those who had compromised their ancestral faith. Conversely, the Samaritans harbored deep resentment towards the Jews, viewing their exclusionary attitudes and their insistence on the supremacy of Jerusalem as an arrogant dismissal of their own religious convictions and their claim to a shared Israelite heritage. This simmering hostility eventually boiled over in the late 2nd century BC during the reign of the Hasmonean dynasty, a period of Jewish resurgence and territorial expansion in Judea. John Hyrcanus, the Jewish high priest and ruler, led a military campaign against the Samaritans. This campaign culminated in a devastating act that would forever deepen the wounds of division, the conquest and subsequent destruction of the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim around 128 BC. For the Jews, the destruction of the rival temple may have been viewed as a righteous act, a necessary purging of a heretical place of worship, and a reaffirmation of the singular authority of Jerusalem. However, for the Samaritans, it was a catastrophic event, a profound act of religious persecution that desecrated their holiest site and symbolized their subjugation to Judean power. The destruction of their temple on Mount Gerizim left an indelible scar on the Samaritan consciousness, intensifying their hatred and resentment towards the Jews, and solidifying the legacy of animosity that defined their relationship for generations to come. By the time Jesus began his ministry in the 1st century AD, the chasm between Jews and Samaritans was a deeply entrenched reality of life in the region. Centuries of diverging religious practices, conflicting interpretations of Scripture, and the violent destruction of the Samaritan temple had created a seemingly unbridgeable gulf. Social interaction was minimal, and mutual disdain was palpable. It was against this backdrop of deeply ingrained division that Jesus' encounters with the Samaritans would take on such radical significance, offering a revolutionary vision of unity and compassion that directly challenged the prevailing prejudices and offered a path toward healing the ancient wounds of separation. The hardening of their distinct identities, fueled by theological differences and cemented by the destruction of a sacred space, had created a seemingly unbreakable barrier. Yet the teachings and actions of Jesus would soon test its very foundations. The centuries of separation and animosity between Jews and Samaritans had built formidable walls of prejudice and avoidance. By the time Jesus of Nazareth began his public ministry, these walls stood tall and seemingly impenetrable. Jews would often go to great lengths to bypass Samaria when traveling between Galilee and Judea, preferring longer routes to avoid contact with a people they considered ritually impure and theologically misguided. It was within this climate of deep-seated division that Jesus, with his characteristic disregard for societal norms and his profound compassion, chose to engage with the Samaritans, offering glimpses of a radical inclusivity that would challenge the very foundations of their ancient feud. One of the most poignant and transformative encounters occurred near the ancient city of Sychar in Samaria. Jesus, weary from his journey, stopped at Jacob's well, a site steeped in patriarchal history. It was midday, and his disciples had gone into the town to buy food. As Jesus rested by the well, a Samaritan woman approached to draw water. In a moment that defied the rigid social and religious customs of the time, Jesus initiated a conversation with her, asking, "Give me a drink." The woman was taken aback. "How is it?" she replied, her voice laced with a mixture of surprise and perhaps a hint of suspicion, "that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" The societal norms were clear. Jews did not associate with Samaritans. Yet, here was Jesus, a man whose very being seemed to radiate an unusual aura, breaking down this long-standing barrier with a simple request. Their conversation unfolded layer by layer, moving from the mundane act of drawing water to profound spiritual truths. Jesus spoke to her of living water, a water that would quench spiritual thirst forever. Intrigued and perhaps a little perplexed, the woman pressed him further. As their dialogue deepened, Jesus revealed an intimate knowledge of her personal life, a life marked by multiple marriages and a current relationship outside the bounds of traditional marriage. This revelation, delivered without judgment but with a profound understanding, struck a chord within her. She recognized that she was in the presence of someone extraordinary, someone who saw beyond the surface and into the depths of her being. The conversation then turned to the central point of contention between Jews and Samaritans: the proper place of worship. "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain," she said, gesturing towards Mount Gerizim. "But you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." This was the age-old dispute, the question that had fueled centuries of division. Jesus' response was revolutionary. He did not side with either faction, but instead introduced a new paradigm of worship, one that transcended geographical boundaries and external rituals. "Woman," he replied, his voice filled with a gentle authority, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in truth." With these words, Jesus dismantled the very basis of their centuries-long conflict over sacred space. He declared that true worship was not confined to specific locations, but was a matter of the heart, a genuine connection with God in spirit and truth. This was a radical concept, one that offered a path to unity and reconciliation that bypassed the entrenched positions of both Jews and Samaritans. Deeply moved by Jesus' words and recognizing the profound truth they contained, the woman's skepticism began to melt away. She pondered the possibility that this man could be the long-awaited Messiah. Leaving her water jar at the well, she hurried back to her town and proclaimed to the people, "Come, see a man who told me everything I have ever done. Could this be the Messiah?" Her testimony sparked curiosity and a willingness to encounter this remarkable man for themselves. The Samaritans from the town flocked to Jacob's well, and at the woman's urging, they invited Jesus to stay with them. He accepted their invitation and spent 2 days among them, teaching them and sharing the message of God's kingdom. As a result of his presence and his words, many more Samaritans believed in him. This encounter at the well was a powerful demonstration of Jesus' ability to break down societal barriers and connect with individuals on a deeply human and spiritual level, regardless of their background or perceived status. Another instance highlighting Jesus' compassion towards the Samaritans is found in the account of the 10 lepers. As Jesus traveled through the region between Samaria and Galilee, he was approached by 10 men afflicted with leprosy, a debilitating and isolating disease that ostracized individuals from their communities. Keeping their distance, as was required by law, they cried out to him for mercy. Moved by their desperate plight, Jesus instructed them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests, in accordance with the Mosaic law concerning the cleansing of lepers." As they journeyed, their faith was rewarded, and they were healed. However, only one of the 10 returned to express his gratitude to Jesus. Luke's Gospel specifically notes that this man was a Samaritan. Falling at Jesus' feet, he praised God in a loud voice and thanked him profusely. Jesus, acknowledging his heartfelt gratitude and perhaps noting the absence of the others, asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" This incident underscores the inclusivity of God's grace and the importance of gratitude, regardless of ethnic or religious affiliation. The Samaritan, the outsider in the eyes of the Jews, was the one who demonstrated true thankfulness, highlighting that faith and a genuine response to God's blessings were not confined by societal boundaries. Jesus' interaction with this grateful Samaritan served as another powerful testament to his willingness to embrace those marginalized and despised by the prevailing social order. These encounters, at the well and on the road, were not isolated incidents. They were part of a consistent pattern in Jesus' ministry, a deliberate challenge to the entrenched animosity between Jews and Samaritans, offering a vision of a community bound by love and a shared devotion to God that transcended historical divisions. Despite the seemingly insurmountable barriers of history, religion, and cultural animosity that separated Jews and Samaritans, Jesus consistently reached out to those on the fringes, challenging the established norms of his time with acts of compassion and pronouncements of radical inclusivity. His interactions with the Samaritans were not mere sluchina encounters. They were deliberate demonstrations of a love that transcended human-made divisions, offering a powerful vision of unity rooted in a shared humanity and a singular devotion to God that went beyond the confines of tradition and territory. Consider the instance when Jesus sent out his disciples on a missionary journey. His instructions, as recorded in Matthew 10:5-6, initially directed them, "Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel." This instruction, seemingly restrictive, likely served a specific purpose within the unfolding narrative of Jesus' ministry, perhaps to first solidify his message within his own people before extending it outwards. However, Jesus' own actions and teachings consistently demonstrated a heart that knew no such limitations. As Jesus' ministry progressed, his interactions with Samaritans became more direct and transformative. The encounter at Jacob's well, detailed previously, stands as a cornerstone of this outreach, showcasing his willingness to engage in deep theological discussion with a Samaritan woman, breaking social and cultural taboos in the process. His declaration that true worship transcends geographical locations and resides in the spirit and in truth offered a pathway beyond the centuries-long dispute over Jerusalem and Mount Gerizim. The parable of the Good Samaritan, recounted in Luke 10:25-37, remains one of the most powerful and enduring illustrations of Jesus' teaching on loving one's neighbor. When a legal expert asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus responded with a story. A Jewish man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho was ambushed, robbed, beaten, and left for dead. A priest and a Levite, both highly respected figures within Jewish society, passed by the injured man without offering assistance, perhaps out of fear of ritual defilement or simply a lack of compassion. Then, a Samaritan, an individual whom Jesus' Jewish audience would have considered an outsider and even an enemy, came upon the wounded man. Moved with compassion, the Samaritan tended to his wounds, provided him with transportation, and ensured his care at an inn, bearing the financial cost himself. By making a Samaritan the epitome of neighborly love and compassion, Jesus directly challenged the ingrained prejudices of his listeners, forcing them to confront their own narrow definitions of community and their assumptions about who was worthy of their care. The parable's powerful message resonated then, as it continues to resonate today. Our neighbor is anyone in need, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, or social standing. Another significant instance of Jesus' inclusive approach is found in the healing of the 10 lepers. As previously mentioned, the one who returned to express his gratitude was a Samaritan. Jesus' poignant question, "Were there not 10 cleansed? But the 9, where are they? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" highlights the unexpected faith and gratitude found in someone considered an outsider. This event subtly but powerfully challenged the notion that spiritual responsiveness was exclusive to the Jewish people. Even when faced with hostility from a Samaritan village, as recorded in Luke 9:51-56, when he and his disciples were traveling towards Jerusalem, Jesus' reaction stood in stark contrast to the fiery indignation of his disciples, James and John, who wanted to call down fire from heaven to destroy the inhospitable village. Jesus rebuked them, demonstrating that his mission was one of peace and salvation, not condemnation and destruction, even towards those who rejected him. The cumulative effect of these interactions and teachings was transformative. Jesus consistently modeled a behavior that transcended the ancient divisions, demonstrating through his actions and his words that God's love and mercy extended to all. He planted seeds of a new understanding, a vision of a community united not by rigid adherence to tradition or exclusive claims to divine favor, but by love, compassion, and a genuine connection to God in spirit and truth. While the historical animosity between Jews and Samaritans persisted for centuries after Jesus' earthly ministry, his encounters with them served as a powerful and enduring testament to the possibility of reconciliation and the universality of God's grace. The early Christian church, founded on the principles of inclusivity and love that Jesus exemplified, would eventually embrace both Jews and Samaritans, further breaking down the ancient barriers. Even today, small Samaritan communities continue to exist in the Middle East, preserving their ancient traditions and their unique identity. Their ongoing presence serves as a reminder of this long and complex history. The story of the Samaritans, marked by division, conflict, and moments of unexpected connection with Jesus, offers timeless lessons about the dangers of prejudice and the transformative power of love and understanding. It challenges us to examine our own biases, to look beyond superficial differences, and to embrace the radical call to love our neighbors, regardless of who they are or where they come from. In a world still fractured by division, the message of unity and compassion that Jesus embodied in his interactions with the Samaritans remains profoundly relevant, a beacon of hope for bridging the divides that separate us. This exploration into the historical and spiritual significance of the Samaritans reveals that true faith and love know no boundaries. Just as Jesus reached out to those considered outsiders in his time, we too are called to extend our hearts and hands to those different from us, fostering understanding and building communities rooted in the timeless principles of compassion and unity. The story of the Samaritans, therefore, is not just a historical footnote. It is a living testament to the enduring power of love to overcome even the deepest divisions.